The old county courthouse in Maple Springs, Virginia, was not used to this kind of attention. Normally, the echoing halls carried the quiet shuffle of lawyers in worn suits and clerks balancing stacks of paperwork. On most days, a handful of traffic violation hearings or a land dispute case were the most excitement the building saw. But today, it was different. The stone steps outside were crowded with local residents. News vans lined the curb, and the air buzzed with attention that could almost be tasted. Inside, every bench in the public gallery was full. Retired farmers in baseball caps, mothers with restless toddlers, curious college students, and reporters clutching notepads were crammed together. The room smelled faintly of polished wood, coffee from the vending machine down the hall, and something else, something sharper that only a few people noticed. The case was unlike anything the town had faced in decades. The defendant, Marcus Hawley, was accused of kidnapping 3-year-old Lily Morrison and holding her for 4 harrowing days before police rescued her. He sat at the defense table now, wearing a crisp suit that didn't quite disguise the cold glint in his eyes. He looked calm, almost bored, as if the entire trial were an inconvenience rather than a fight for his freedom. On the other side of the room, the prosecution's table was stacked high with folders, photographs, and binders. Assistant District Attorney Claire Jennings kept her eyes fixed on the judge's bench, her jaw set in determination. This case wasn't just about winning, it was about protecting the smallest and most vulnerable in their community. Near the front, standing just to the side of the jury box, was Officer James Daniels, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with a calm, steady demeanor. His partner, however, was the one drawing the most attention. Sitting obediently at Daniel's side was Rex, a large German shepherd with intelligent brown eyes and a glossy black and tan coat. Rex was part of the Maple Springs Police Department's K-9 unit, trained in scent detection, search and rescue, and suspect apprehension. Today, Rex was not here for a dramatic takedown. He was there for security, and in a way, for comfort. Daniels had noticed that sometimes the mere presence of the big, steady dog could calm witnesses, especially children. Lily sat in the second row with her mother, Emily Morrison. Emily's hands were white-knuckled around a tissue, her eyes scanning the room nervously. Her daughter, dressed in a soft yellow cardigan and a simple floral dress, was clutching a small stuffed bunny so tightly that its fabric ears were permanently bent. Lily's strawberry blonde hair was pulled back in a neat braid, but a small section had already come loose, falling into her wide blue eyes. Everyone in that room knew what the stakes were. The evidence against Marcus Hawley was strong circumstantial, but strong. Security cameras had captured him near the Morrison home. Tire tracks near the basement window matched his truck. Neighbors had reported seeing his vehicle in the area. But the defense had an explanation for every single point. Without Lily's testimony, there was still room for doubt. And the jury? The jury was made up of 12 people who had been instructed to keep an open mind, to listen to both sides. But they were also 12 people who had just spent the last week listening to conflicting accounts, watching exhibits projected on a big screen, and seeing Marcus sit there without flinching. The weight of deciding someone's fate was beginning to settle heavily on them. The judge, a tall man with a thinning hairline named Harold Whitaker, banged his gavel. We will now proceed with the witness testimony. Will the prosecution call its next witness? Claire Jennings stood. The prosecution calls Lily Morrison. The murmur in the gallery ceased instantly. Heads turned toward the second row, as Emily gently helped her daughter stand. Lily's steps were tiny, hesitant. She clung to her mother's skirt for the first few paces before letting go. The bailiff met her halfway and escorted her to the witness stand. Rex's ears flicked as she passed by, his eyes following her in a calm but alert way. Daniels gave the dog a subtle signal to stay. Lily climbed onto the big leather chair, her legs swinging far above the floor. The bailiff handed her a small microphone, and the judge leaned forward slightly. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Do you know why you're here today?" She gave a tiny nod, her eyes darting around the room. "We just need you to answer a few questions, all right?" The bailiff stepped closer. "Do you promise to tell the truth?" Another small nod. She hugged her bunny tighter. Claire Jennings approached the stand with a warm smile. "Hi, Lily. My name is Claire. Do you remember me?" "Yes," Lily whispered. "I just want to ask you a few things. Is that okay?" Lily's gaze flicked toward the defense table. The man sitting there, the man she had once seen in the dim light of her basement, was watching her with an unreadable expression. Her small shoulders stiffened. Claire tried again. "Lily, do you see the person who took you from your home?" That day, Lily's eyes dropped to her shoes. She didn't speak. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Claire's voice remained gentle. "That's okay. We can take our time." The jurors shifted in their seats. One woman in the back row of the jury leaned forward slightly, as if willing the child to speak. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Emily bit her lip so hard it nearly bled. She had been warned this might happen. Her daughter had been through something no child should endure. The idea of speaking about it in front of strangers, especially in front of him, was terrifying. Officer Daniels watched carefully. He knew Rex could sense anxiety and fear. The dog's head tilted slightly, eyes never leaving Lily. Claire tried another approach. "Lily, is there anything you can tell us about what happened?" No answer. The defense attorney, a slick man named Vincent Gray, smirked slightly, as if he could already feel the tide turning in his favor. Judge Whitaker adjusted his glasses. "Counselor, do you need a moment?" Claire exhaled. "Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution requests a short recess." "Granted. 10 minutes." The gavel came down again. The gallery erupted into a low hum of whispered conversations as people stood and stretched. Emily immediately went to the stand, gathering Lily into her arms. She murmured to her softly, but Lily only buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Officer Daniels stepped aside to give them privacy. Rex, however, sat exactly where he was, watching. His tail thumped once against the floor when Lily glanced at him. The little girl hesitated, then slid down from her mother's lap and walked slowly toward the big German shepherd. Her bunny dangled from one hand. She stopped just short of touching him, looking up into his deep brown eyes. Daniel smiled faintly. "You can pet him if you want. His name's Rex. He's very friendly." Lily looked at her mother, who gave a small nod. Then, without another word, Lily crouched down beside Rex. She placed one small hand on his fur, leaning close so her lips were near his ear. What she said was barely audible, even to Daniels, who was standing right there. But he caught just enough to make his stomach tighten, and then he saw Rex change. The dog's ears went up, his head turned sharply toward the defense table, and his body took on that unmistakable alert posture. It was the same stance he used when he caught a scent match in the field. Daniels didn't move. He just watched. Lily stood, brushed her dress down with her free hand, and walked back to her mother. She didn't seem frightened, now just thoughtful, as though she had remembered something important. Daniel's mind raced. In his years as a K-9 officer, he had learned to trust Rex's instincts more than anything else. And if Rex had reacted like that inside a courtroom, it meant something. Something big. When court reconvened, the atmosphere was different. Something had shifted, though only a few people noticed. Officer Daniels was one of them. Rex had not taken his eyes off the defense table since the recess ended. His posture wasn't tense yet, but it was focused, deliberate, as if the man sitting there had suddenly become the center of his attention. Daniels made a mental note to mention it to Claire Jennings later. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Whitaker returned to his bench, peering down over his glasses. "Counselor, you may continue your examination." Claire rose from her seat and offered Lily a reassuring smile. "Lily, remember we talked about how this is just like telling a story to your mom? You can tell me in your own words." Lily nodded slightly, but kept her gaze on her lap. Her stuffed bunny sat on the witness stand beside her. Its head flopped over the edge. She rubbed its paw between her fingers, her shoulders hunched as if she were trying to make herself smaller. Claire glanced toward Emily, who was sitting just a few feet away. Emily gave a subtle thumbs up, her eyes filled with encouragement. The prosecutor tried again. "Lily, can you tell us about the day you went missing?" Lily's lips parted, but no sound came out. She swallowed hard, her eyes flicking toward the defense table. Marcus Hawley was watching her not with open hostility, but with a fixed, unwavering stare that carried its own kind of intimidation. His attorney sat beside him, jotting notes and whispering occasionally, but Marcus didn't look away from the child. Claire softened her voice even further. "It's okay. You're safe here. No one can hurt you in this room." Lily finally spoke, but her voice was so faint that the microphone barely picked it up. "I don't want to." The jury shifted in their seats. The foreman, a middle-aged mechanic named Ron Porter, looked concerned. A woman in the back row, juror number 9, chewed her lip nervously. This wasn't what they'd expected. Claire pressed gently. "Why not, sweetheart?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head and clutched her bunny tighter, pulling it against her chest like a shield. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Morrison, if your daughter needs a moment, I'd like to request another short recess." "Your Honor," Claire interrupted. Judge Whitaker hesitated, clearly aware that too many breaks could make the jury restless. But he also knew pressing a traumatized 3-year-old too hard could backfire spectacularly. 5 minutes, he said finally, tapping his gavel. As the bailiff called the recess, Emily rushed to the stand, wrapping her arms around Lily and whispering softly in her ear. Officer Daniels stayed back, observing. Rex, however, had already turned his head toward them, his ears angled forward. Daniels gave the silent hand signal for watch, and Rex's attention locked in completely. The dog's gaze wasn't on Emily, it was on Lily. After a moment, Emily guided her daughter toward the gallery. They passed directly by Rex's spot. Lily slowed her steps, her free hand brushing her dress. She looked down at the dog, and Rex, in turn, tilted his head as if inviting her closer. Emily hesitated. Daniels gave her a polite nod. "It's fine. He's friendly." Lily stepped closer. She crouched down so her lips were almost level with Rex's ear, just as she had during the first recess. Daniels caught it again, the same thing. Lily whispered something so quietly that even the reporters, who were leaning forward in hopes of catching a stray word, couldn't make it out. But Rex reacted instantly. His head lifted, his ears pointed straight up, and his eyes snapped toward Marcus Hawley. Daniel's pulse ticked up. That was no coincidence. Did she say something to him? Emily asked quietly. Daniels gave a careful, neutral reply. She and Rex seemed to understand each other. Lily gave Rex a tiny pat on the nose, and then returned to her seat with her mother. 5 minutes later, the court came back to order. Lily was once again in the witness stand, her bunny resting on her lap. Claire Jennings didn't push the abduction details right away this time. Instead, she started with gentle, almost unrelated questions. "Lily, do you like animals?" A small nod. "Do you like Rex?" Another nod. "Can you tell us what you said to him just now?" The defense attorney shot to his feet. Objection. Relevance. Claire turned to the judge. Your Honor, I believe the witness may have expressed an observation that is directly connected to the case. The judge considered for a moment. I'll allow it. Overruled. Claire smiled again at Lily. It's okay. You can tell us. Lily's voice was hesitant, but clear enough to be heard this time. I told him the man smells like the basement. The room froze. Claire blinked slowly. The basement? Lily nodded. The one where he found me. Even jurors who had been trying to keep poker faces showed signs of shock. The foreman leaned back in his seat, eyebrows raised. Two reporters scribbled furiously. Marcus Hawley shifted uncomfortably for the first time in the entire trial. Vincent Gray was on his feet again. Your Honor, we object to this line of questioning. The witness is 3 years old. Her testimony is unreliable. And overruled. Judge Whitaker cut in firmly. The witness may continue. Claire leaned forward, speaking softly. Lily, can you tell us what you mean by the man smells like the basement? The little girl's eyes flicked toward Marcus, then to Rex. When Rex came to our house, he went in the basement and smelled a lot. Then he barked. He was looking for me. And when you saw the man in court today? Claire prompted. Lily took a breath so small it barely moved her chest. He smells the same. A collective murmur ran through the courtroom before the judge banged his gavel for silence. Daniel's mind was working quickly. He knew that scent recognition was one of the most reliable instincts in a trained canine. If Lily could associate Marcus Hale's personal scent with the basement where she had been held, and Rex confirmed that association, it could become an unexpected but powerful piece of evidence. He glanced down at Rex. The dog was still watching Marcus, ears forward, body rigid but controlled. Daniels had seen that stance before on search operations, just moments before Rex would indicate a scent match. Claire looked back toward Daniels, reading the unspoken question in his eyes. He gave a single, subtle nod. The defense tried to dismiss it as a child's confused imagination. Vincent Gray launched into a mini lecture for the jury about how scents are subjective, how memory in children is unreliable, and how the suggestion of a familiar smell could be implanted unintentionally. But it was too late. The words, "The man smells like the basement," were now etched into everyone's mind. Reporters in the gallery were already crafting headlines. Jurors were replaying Lily's hesitant but unshakable voice in their heads. And Marcus Hawley. He was tapping his fingers on the table now, the first visible crack in his carefully controlled demeanor. When the judge called for lunch recess, the tension followed everyone out of the courtroom like an invisible fog. Danielle stayed behind. For a moment, kneeling beside Rex. You're onto something, aren't you, boy? Rex's gaze didn't waver from the defense table. Daniels gave his partner a quiet pat on the neck. We're going to make sure they hear you. The courthouse cafeteria was unusually quiet for a midday recess. Normally, there was the chatter of clerks swapping gossip, lawyers arguing over sandwiches, and jurors making awkward small talk. But today, conversation was hushed, almost reverent. Everyone knew something strange had happened inside that courtroom. The man smells like the basement. Those 6 words had shifted the atmosphere of the trial. And not just for the jury officer. Daniels had seen it in the defendant's posture, in the prosecutor's eyes, and in Rex's body language. The pieces were aligning in a way that made his instincts prickle. While most people headed downstairs for coffee or a quick bite, Daniels stayed in the courtroom with Rex. He knelt beside the German shepherd, his voice low. What did she tell you, buddy? Rex looked at him, ears flicking forward, then toward the door Marcus Hawley had walked through minutes earlier. The dog's tail didn't wag. It was a still, watchful kind of focus, the same kind Rex had in the field when he was seconds away from an alert. Daniels rubbed behind his ears. Yeah, I know. You caught it, didn't you? He didn't need Rex to answer. He trusted that dog's nose more than any piece of technology the department owned. When the jury filed back in after lunch, some looked different, more focused, less bored. A few had spent the break scribbling notes in their juror notebooks. That was always a sign that something had landed. Marcus Holley returned with his attorney, his expression neutral again, but his body language betrayed something else. His hands were clasped a little too tightly, his shoulders a little too stiff. Lily was not on the stand now. The court had agreed to let her rest for the afternoon, but she sat with her mother in the gallery, still clutching her bunny. Every so often, her eyes drifted toward Rex, as if the dog were her personal anchor. In a room full of strangers, Claire Jennings stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, before we move forward with other witnesses, I'd like to request a demonstration for the jury. Something that may help clarify the testimony we heard earlier. Vincent Gray was already half rising from his chair. Objection, this is highly irregular and could prejudice the jury. A courtroom is not a laboratory. Overruled, Judge Whitaker said almost instantly, surprising even Daniels. I'll allow the demonstration, provided it's relevant and controlled. Claire nodded. It is, Your Honor. She turned to Daniels. Officer, would you please bring Rex forward? Daniels stood, giving Rex the heel signal. The shepherd moved smoothly to his side, gaze still fixed ahead. Daniels positioned him in front of the jury box so they could see every movement. Officer Daniels, Claire began, could you explain for the jury what Rex is trained to do in terms of scent detection? Yes, ma'am. Rex is a certified canine with over 1,200 hours of training in tracking, narcotics detection, and scent matching. When presented with a scent sample, he can match it to the same scent on an object or person, even in a crowded space. And when Rex identifies a scent match, what does he do? He sits directly in front of the source and gives a single alert bark. Claire moved to the prosecution table and picked up a sealed evidence bag containing a small cloth. This, members of the jury, is a scent article collected from the basement where Lily was found. It's been stored under proper chain of custody since the investigation began. Vincent Gray was on his feet again. Your Honor, I object. 2-0, overruled, Whitaker said firmly. Continue. Claire handed the bag to Daniels. Officer, could you have Rex perform a scent match in this courtroom? Yes, ma'am. Daniels unsealed the bag, allowing Rex to sniff the cloth. The dog inhaled deeply, then looked up at Daniels, ready for the next command. Fine, Daniels said simply. Rex lowered his head and began moving slowly across. The front of the courtroom, the gallery went silent. The only sounds were the faint jingle of Rex's collar and the shuffle of his paws on the polished wood floor. He moved past the prosecution table, past the jury box, and toward the back row of benches. He sniffed the shoes of 2 court clerks sitting there, then moved on without interest. Then he turned. Daniels could almost feel the shift in the air. As Rex walked toward the defense table, the dog's movements were deliberate now, his tail held straight behind him. He circled once, sniffing the air, then stopped directly in front of Marcus Holley, and sat. A single sharp bark exploded from his chest. The sound bounced off the paneled walls and seemed to hang in the air for several seconds. The jurors froze. A few glanced at each other, wide-eyed. Even Judge Whitaker looked momentarily taken aback before regaining his composure. Daniels straightened. Rex is indicating a scent match between the sample and this individual. Vincent Gray's. Objection was immediate and loud. This is not scientific evidence. It's a stunt designed to influence the jury. Claire countered smoothly. The defense is welcome to cross-examine Officer Daniels about canine scent reliability. But the jury is entitled to witness what the dog is trained to do. While the attorneys argued, Daniels watched Marcus. The man's expression was carefully neutral again, but there was a tightness around his eyes, a flicker of discomfort he couldn't hide. Rex, meanwhile, stayed seated, gaze locked on Marcus like a soldier awaiting orders. Lily shifted in her seat, whispering something to her mother. Emily gave a small nod and squeezed her hand. When the judge finally allowed the demonstration to stand as part of the record, Claire thanked Daniels and told him he could return to his seat. But as he guided Rex back, Daniels noticed something else. Rex glanced over his shoulder at Marcus twice, as if double-checking his target. Wasn't doubt, it was certainty. After the demonstration, the mood in the courtroom was completely different. The jurors were leaning forward in their seats, more attentive than they had been all week. The gallery was buzzing with silent energy. Daniels knew they had just witnessed something powerful. It wasn't hard science in the strictest legal sense, but it was raw, unfiltered instinct, and in a case like this, instinct could sway hearts even when facts were contested. Rex curled up beside Daniels' chair, his job for the moment done, but Daniels knew the dog wasn't really resting. He could see it in the way Rex's ears stayed half-cocked, the way his breathing was just a bit shallower than usual. He was waiting for the next move. The echo of Rex's single bark was still fading when Judge Whitaker banged his gavel. "Order in the court," he said, though his tone carried less irritation than usual. Even he seemed affected by what had just happened. Officer Daniels guided Rex back to his position near the jury box. The dog sat there, calm and unflinching, still keeping Marcus Holly in his peripheral vision. Daniels knew that. Look, it was the expression Rex wore when he was sure. Claire Jennings didn't waste a second. "Your Honor, the prosecution requests permission to recall Lily Morrison to the stand for a brief clarification." Vincent Gray shot up. "Objection. This is clearly an attempt to capitalize on the theatrics we just witnessed. The witness is 3 years old. Her memory is fragile. Her statements unreliable." "Overruled," Judge Whitaker said firmly. "Given the gravity of the case, the court will allow the testimony. Proceed." Emily Morrison's arm tightened around her daughter for a moment before she helped her back to the stand. Lily climbed up, the oversized leather chair swallowing her small frame. She kept her bunny clutched tightly against her chest. Claire approached slowly, crouching so she was at eye level. Her voice was soft, deliberate. "Hi again, Lily. Remember, you're safe here. No one can hurt you in this room. Can you tell me again what you told Rex earlier?" Lily glanced toward Rex, and at Marcus Holly, her little brow furrowed. "I told him the man smells like the basement." The words rang out across the silent room. Claire didn't rush. She gave the jury a moment to absorb it. "And what basement do you mean, Lily?" "The one where I was. Do you remember what happened in that basement?" The child's voice was steady, but small. "It was dark. I was scared. My bunny was on the floor, but I couldn't get it, 'cause my hands were like this." She mimed her wrists being bound together. A ripple of shock moved through the gallery. The judge's face tightened, but he let her continue. "Was anyone else in the basement with you?" Claire asked gently. "Yes," Lily said without hesitation. "Him." She pointed a tiny finger at Marcus Hallé. The defense attorney was on his feet in an instant. "Objection. Leading prejudicial." The judge cut him off. "Overruled. The witness may answer in her own words." Claire pressed on. "Lily, how do you know it was him?" She paused, then said with utter childlike simplicity, "Because he smells the same now as he did then." The jurors were transfixed. It wasn't scientific jargon. It wasn't legal argument. It was the raw, unfiltered truth as a child understood it. And somehow, that made it more powerful. Vincent Gray seized his chance to cross-examine. He approached the stand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lily, you like dogs, don't you? She nodded. And Rex is a very nice dog? Another nod. You know that Rex listens to Officer Daniels, right? Yes. And sometimes dogs bark just because someone tells them to? She tilted her head, considering, then shook it firmly. Not Rex. He only barks when he smells something. The defense attorney's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. He tried another tactic. Lily, can you smell a lot of things? Yes. Can you smell what I had for lunch? He asked with a forced chuckle. The little girl wrinkled her nose. Hot dogs and mustard. Several jurors stifled laughs. Gray's jaw tightened. Well, smells can be tricky, can't they? Sometimes they remind us of other smells, even if they're not the same. Lily's answer was immediate. It's the same. The cross-examination was over in less than 2 minutes. Gray returned to his seat, clearly unsettled. Claire approached once more, keeping her questions minimal. Lily, did anyone tell you what to say today? No. Did anyone tell you to say the man smells like the basement? She shook her head. I just know it. Claire smiled warmly. Thank you, Lily. You've been very brave. The judge dismissed her, and Emily rushed forward to guide her daughter back to their seats. As they passed Rex, Lily paused to give the shepherd a gentle pat. Rex's tail thumped twice against the floor. After Lily stepped down, the courtroom's mood was electric. The jurors exchanged glances, unspoken conversations passing between them. They had just witnessed a direct connection between a child's sensory memory and the behavior of a trained police dog, two independent points converging on the same man. Judge Whitaker called for a short recess to allow the jury to process the testimony. In reality, everyone knew he was giving the defense time to recover from the blow. Daniels stayed in his position, one hand resting on Rex's collar. He could feel the slight vibration of the dog's breathing, steady but alert. You nailed it, boy, Daniels murmured. In the hallway, whispers ran like wildfire. Did you hear what she said? She pointed right at him. And the dog straight to him. Didn't even hesitate. Even reporters who normally prided themselves on impartiality couldn't hide their reactions. One veteran crime journalist muttered, "That just killed his alibi, if you ask me." When court resumed, the defense's tone had shifted. Gray tried to minimize the importance of scent-based testimony, calling it subjective and unreliable. He referenced academic articles about memory distortion in young children and questioned whether scent association could hold up to scrutiny. But the jury's faces told a different story. They weren't thinking about psychology papers, they were remembering the image of a little girl pointing her finger and saying, "It's the same." Claire seized the moment and redirect. "Officer Daniels," she said, "in your professional experience, how reliable is Rex in scent matching?" Daniels straightened in the witness box. Over the last 6 years, Rex has conducted more than 200 scent identifications. His accuracy rate is over 95%, confirmed through independent verification and follow-up investigation. He does not false alert unless environmental factors interfere, and even then, it's rare. And in your view, did anything in this courtroom demonstration suggest a false alert? No, ma'am. His alert was direct, decisive, and consistent with a confirmed match. By the time the court adjourned for the day, the case had taken on a new energy. It was no longer just about circumstantial evidence and disputed timelines. It was about a child's sensory truth and the instincts of a dog whose training was beyond question. As Daniels walked Rex out to the cruiser, Emily and Lily passed by. Lily paused, holding out her bunny. "This is for Rex," she said shyly. Daniels smiled. "He'll take good care of it." Rex accepted the toy gently. In his mouth, tail wagging once before he turned back toward the courthouse doors, as if the job wasn't finished yet. The courtroom seemed to pause in time after Lily's whispered words had been repeated. "The man smells like the basement." Every person present felt the weight of those words in a different way. For the prosecutor, it was an unexpected lifeline, a fragile thread of truth dangling between the child's memory and the jury's understanding. For the defense attorney, it was a dangerous seed that, if allowed to take root, could grow into an irrefutable narrative. For the man, at the defense table, it was a dagger. His fingers tightened around the edges of his chair, his jaw stiffening in a silent reaction he tried to hide. Officer Daniels had seen many dramatic moments in his career, but this was different. He knew scent was more than a casual observation. It was memory. Smell had the power to unlock emotions and moments long buried, and for a child as young as Lily, it could be the most vivid sense of all. The prosecutor rose slowly, as though careful not to shatter the fragile tension. "Lily," he said gently, moving toward the witness stand, "can you tell me more about the basement you're talking about?" Lily looked down at her stuffed bunny, twisting its ear between her fingers. Her voice was small, barely more than a whisper. "It's dark. There's a light with strings." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor continued softly, "And what made you remember it just now?" Her eyes lifted briefly toward Rex, the German shepherd sitting attentively at Daniel's side. "Because Rex smelled the same way before, at my house, in the basement. When the bad man was there." The jury straightened in their seats. "The prosecutor asked, "When you say the bad man, do you mean the man sitting there?" He pointed toward the defense table. Lily's gaze flicked toward the man. Then she looked down again. "Yes." The defense attorney shot up from his chair. "Objection. This is nothing more than suggestive questioning from a frightened child. She's barely 3 years old. How could she possibly understand what she's saying?" The judge raised a hand for silence. His eyes lingered on Lily for a moment before addressing the attorneys. "I will allow this line of questioning to continue. The jury will weigh the credibility of her words." The defense attorney sat reluctantly, but his glare toward the prosecutor was sharp enough to cut. "The story deepens." The prosecutor paced slowly in front of the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just heard is not merely the rambling of a toddler. It is a detail, precise and sensory, that ties directly into our evidence." He turned back to Lily. "Lily, when Rex came to your house, what was he doing in the basement?" Her little brow furrowed, as though she was replaying the moment in her mind. "He was sniffing a lot, and then he barked." "Do you remember what happened after he barked?" "The police came and took the bad man away." A juror, a middle-aged woman in a dark blazer, exchanged a glance with the man beside her. The story was simple, but simplicity made it powerful. Children rarely invented specific sensory details, like smells, unless they had experienced them. The prosecutor nodded and smiled gently. "Thank you, Lily. You've been very brave." He turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, this child's sensory association aligns perfectly with the physical evidence we recovered from the basement. Same basement where fibers matching the victim's clothing were found." The defense attorney jumped in. "Your Honor, this is absurd. Scent association is subjective. A smell in a basement could be anything: mold, dust, old furniture. There is no scientific reliability in a child's recollection of a smell." But Daniel's voice cut through before the prosecutor could respond. "Sir, with all due respect, Rex's scent tracking is not subjective. It's been tested in hundreds of field operations. When he reacts, it's because the chemical scent signature matches what he's been trained to find." The judge looked at Daniels. "And you're saying Rex reacted in the same way, both in the basement and today, here, near the defendant?" "Yes, Your Honor," Daniels replied firmly. The jury leans in. What happened next was almost imperceptible. But Daniels caught it. The jury's posture changed. Several members leaned forward, elbows on their knees, eyes fixed on the child. The atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just about a basement anymore. It was about the bridge between a human memory and a dog's undeniable instinct. The combination was hard to ignore. The prosecutor reinforced the connection. Ladies and gentlemen, you will soon see that this detail is not random. It's consistent with our timeline, with our evidence, and with the statements from our K-9 officer. It is an unplanned, unrehearsed moment of truth from the only person who was there when the crime happened and who survived it. Lily sat quietly, swinging her feet above the floor, unaware that her words were reshaping the trial. The defense fights back. The defense attorney knew the damage was growing with each passing minute. He rose and walked slowly toward the child. His voice was softer now, but edged with calculation. "Lily," he began, "sometimes basements smell funny, don't they? Maybe like paint or boxes or old toys?" She shrugged. "I guess. And you've been in lots of basements before, right? Maybe at friends' houses?" Lily shook her head. "No, just mine." That answer drew a faint smile from the prosecutor and a tightening of the defense attorney's jaw. The defense pressed on. "And when you say the bad man, could you be talking about someone else? Maybe a man you saw on TV?" Lily's eyes narrowed in the way only a small child's could when they sensed a trick. "No, it's him." She pointed directly at the defendant. Gasps whispered through the courtroom. The defense attorney stepped back, his hands clasped tightly behind him. The judge's decision. The judge leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen thoughtfully against the bench. "The court will allow the child's testimony to stand. It is for the jury to determine its weight. However," he glanced toward Daniels and Rex, "I am interested in hearing more about this dog's involvement." This was the moment the prosecutor had been waiting for. The groundwork was laid, the jury's curiosity piqued, and the judge's permission granted. The next step would involve showing the connection between scent, memory, and the physical presence of the accused. For now, though, Lily's words hung in the air like a bell's echo. "The man smells like the basement." It wasn't evidence in the traditional sense. No fingerprints, no DNA, but it had something even stronger: authenticity. Behind the scenes, during the short recess that followed, the hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with speculation. Reporters whispered about the child's unexpected testimony, already imagining headlines. Court sketch artists hastily filled in Lily's small figure pointing at the accused, her bunny clutched in one hand. Daniels knelt beside Rex, scratching behind his ears. "You know what she said, buddy?" he murmured. Rex licked his hand, tail giving a slow, steady wag. To Daniels, it felt as if the dog understood everything. The prosecutor approached. "Tomorrow, we'll ask the court for a demonstration. If Rex reacts the same way here as he did in the basement, it could seal this case." Daniels nodded. "He will. He's never missed." From across the hall, the defense attorney watched, his mind racing. He knew that once a jury saw the dog in action, any lingering doubts could vanish. He needed a new strategy and fast. In that moment, everyone in the courthouse knew the trial had reached a turning point. The connection between a frightened child's memory and a police dog's instinct was too striking to ignore. What came next would either solidify the prosecution's case beyond doubt or crumble it entirely. And the deciding factor would be a demonstration no one in that courtroom would ever forget. The judge's gavel struck twice, its sharp crack echoing off the paneled walls, drawing everyone's attention back to the bench. "Officer Daniels," Judge Whitmore said, peering over his glasses, "you've requested a demonstration with your K-9 partner. I will allow it, provided that it is conducted professionally, with no disruptions to these proceedings." "Yes, Your Honor," Daniels replied, his voice steady but his chest tight. He had done dozens of demonstrations with Rex at schools, community events, even for other officers, but never in the middle of a trial that could decide a man's fate. The tension in the courtroom was almost tangible. You could see it in the jurors, leaning slightly forward in their chairs, trying not to appear eager. The defense attorney sat stiff-backed, one leg crossed over the other, tapping a pen against his knee. The prosecutor, however, wore an expression of quiet confidence, as though this was exactly the moment he had been waiting for. Daniels gave Rex a subtle signal. The German shepherd rose to his feet, his posture alert, tail slightly raised, but not wagging. His dark eyes locked on Daniels, waiting for the next command. From the evidence table, Daniels retrieved a sealed bag containing a piece of cloth. It had been collected from the basement where Lily had been found, a dingy, concrete-walled space beneath an abandoned rental house. Even through the plastic, the faint, musty odor seemed to seep out, the kind of smell that clung to old wood and damp cement. "This is the scent item," Daniels announced for the record, holding it up briefly before opening the seal. The room went utterly silent as he removed the cloth and let Rex sniff it. Rex leaned in, nostrils flaring, and then froze, processing the information in the way only a trained police dog could. His ears twitched. Daniels could feel the moment the scent registered in Rex's mind. "Search," Daniels commanded softly. Rex began moving methodically through the courtroom. He ignored the curious looks from jurors and spectators, his nose working furiously as he passed each person in turn. He was all business: sniff, step, his training guiding him like an invisible leash. The defendant's eyes followed Rex warily. He sat perfectly still, though the muscle in his jaw twitched. When Rex was halfway around the room, Daniels caught a subtle shift in the dog's posture, the slightest quickening of pace. He knew that look. Rex was closing in. The dog reached the defense table, sniffed the floor, then raised his head toward the defendant. A moment later, Rex sat down sharply, tail still, gaze fixed on the man. Then came the bark, loud, deep, and echoing. One bark followed by another. It was the signal. The jury reacted instantly. Some eyes widened, some mouths fell open. A few leaned back in their chairs, as if the sound had physically hit them. Daniels didn't move. Neither did Rex. The dog's steady stare at the defendant was like a silent accusation, one that required no translation. "Objection!" The defense attorney shot to his feet. "This is entirely prejudicial. A dog's so-called reaction is not admissible as evidence of guilt." "Overruled," Judge Whitmore said firmly, his gavel tapping once. "The demonstration is not being presented as direct evidence, but as an illustrative aid in understanding the testimony already given." The defense attorney's face flushed crimson. "Your Honor, this is theatrics, nothing more. Dogs can be influenced, not Rex," Daniels interrupted before he could stop himself. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "This dog has located missing persons in collapsed buildings, tracked fugitives across miles of terrain, and found evidence buried for weeks. He doesn't perform, he works." A ripple of murmurs swept through the courtroom. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, the child witness indicated that the defendant smelled like the basement where she was found. This demonstration shows that a trained K9, working independently, identifies the same scent association. The jury is entitled to see that." The judge leaned back, hands steepled. "The objection is noted, but overruled. Proceed." Daniels knelt beside Rex, giving him a reassuring pat. The dog's gaze never wavered from the defendant, as if he knew exactly who the bad man was. The defendant tried to look unimpressed, but there was a tension in his shoulders now, and his eyes flicked toward the jury as though trying to read their thoughts. "Officer Daniels," the prosecutor said, Can you explain to the jury how Rex's training works in a situation like this? Daniels nodded. Rex is trained for scent discrimination. When he smells an item, he memorizes that scent profile and searches for a match. It's not just a single smell. It's a unique combination of odors, like a fingerprint. If Rex sits and alerts, it means he's found that same scent profile. He doesn't alert unless there's a match. The prosecutor glanced at the jurors. So you're saying Rex doesn't just respond to people randomly? No, sir, Daniels replied. He's been trained to ignore all other scents until he finds the target. In this case, the target scent came from that basement cloth. The defense attorney rose again. And how can you guarantee the dog's reaction isn't influenced? By you or the environment? Daniels met his gaze steadily. Because Rex doesn't care about trials, lawyers, or courtrooms. He cares about the scent. He reacts the same way in the middle of the woods as he does here. And today, that scent led him to one person. He didn't have to point. Every juror knew who he meant. Judge Whitmore called for a short recess, perhaps sensing that the tension needed a moment to dissipate before proceeding. As people stood and stretched, conversations buzzed through the room. I've never seen anything like that, one juror murmured to another. Did you see the way that dog just sat there? A reporter whispered to his photographer, like he was staring straight into the man's soul. Lily, who had been sitting with her mother, reached out shyly as Daniels walked past. Rex remembered, she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Daniels crouched down so they were eye level. Yes, he told her, with a faint smile. He remembered. Rex, as if understanding, pressed his head gently against the little girl's hand. When court resumed, the prosecutor didn't waste the momentum. He asked Daniels a series of pointed questions about Rex's accuracy, his history of successful finds, and his independence from handler influence. Daniels answered each one with professional clarity, occasionally glancing toward the jury to ensure they understood. Meanwhile, the defendant avoided looking at Rex entirely. The defense tried to minimize the impact, bringing up the concept of scent contamination and questioning the reliability of canine scent evidence. But it was hard to erase the image already seared into everyone's mind. A loyal police dog, trained to detect truth in a way humans couldn't, sitting in unwavering judgment at the feet of the accused. By the end of the day, the jurors' body language told its own story. They weren't just hearing facts anymore. They had witnessed something. And witnessing, in a courtroom, carries a weight no cross-examination can fully undo. As Daniels led Rex out of the room, he caught the faintest sound of the prosecutor's closing words for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the truth is invisible, but sometimes it has 4 legs, a wet nose, and it sits exactly where it belongs. Rex glanced back once before the door closed behind them, his dark eyes calm, his job for the day complete. The moment Rex barked at the defendant, something intangible shifted inside the courtroom. It wasn't loud, at least not in the physical sense. The bark was just one sound in a space filled with footsteps, murmurs, and the hum of ceiling fans, but it carried a weight that rippled through everyone present. For the jurors, it was like the final puzzle piece sliding into place. They had been staring at a messy table of facts and claims for days, unsure which way the truth leaned. But now, the picture seemed to form clearly in front of them. The defense attorney tried to recover quickly. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, standing so abruptly, his chair clattered against the table behind him. This is a police dog, a trained animal. Dogs can be influenced by their handlers. This was not an impartial act, it was theater. Nothing more. But even as he spoke, his words felt strained. He could sense it too. The tide had turned. The prosecutor's masterstroke prosecutor Helen Morris, who had been waiting patiently for the right moment, stepped forward with a controlled calm. She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't need to. Every pair of eyes in the room was already on her. "Members of the jury," she began, "you've heard testimony, seen evidence, and now witnessed with your own eyes the reaction of a trained canine officer, one who has no bias, no reason to lie, and no stake in this trial. Rex doesn't know about charges or verdicts. He knows scent. And the scent from that basement matches the man sitting right there." She turned, pointing firmly at the defendant. Some jurors actually glanced away from the man, almost as if the accusation carried a physical sting. Helen let the silence stretch for a few seconds before she spoke again. "You may dismiss a human statement as imagination, but you cannot dismiss what this dog has been trained for years to detect." Her voice hardened slightly. "And you cannot dismiss the bravery of a 3-year-old who, despite everything she's been through, told the truth the only way she knew how." The defendant's restlessness. The defendant, Mark Hawley, shifted in his seat for the first time in hours. His attorney had warned him to maintain a calm, almost bored demeanor, but now his hands tightened on the table edge. The subtle movement didn't escape Helen's notice. She walked slowly toward the defense table, eyes locked on Hollis. "Mr. Hollis, you've sat here calmly as witnesses spoke. But when a dog barks, when an animal recognizes something only it can sense, you can't seem to keep that calm, can you?" The defense attorney objected immediately, calling it argumentative questioning, and the judge sustained the objection. Still, the damage was done. The jury had noticed too. The jury's eyes from the jury box. The members exchanged glances. Some nodded ever so slightly, the kind of subtle communication people make when they're beginning to align. On a decision. Juror number 6, a middle-aged woman in a navy cardigan, scribbled something down in her notepad. Juror number 3, a young man with wire-rimmed glasses, folded his arms and leaned back, his gaze never leaving Hollis. Even without words, their body language told the story. The balance of doubt was tipping. Helen's closing push. Helen took advantage of the shift in energy. She began to weave the narrative together, carefully threading Lily's statement into the timeline. "Lily didn't know she'd be here today," Helen said. "She didn't rehearse a script. She didn't plan to say anything about scent. She simply walked past Rex and told him what she recognized, because to her, that recognition was as natural as knowing your own home smell." Helen's pacing was deliberate now, as if she were walking the jury through a room and pointing out each undeniable piece of furniture. She told Rex, "The man smells like the basement. The man, the defendant." And what did Rex do when we tested that claim? He confirmed it, without hesitation, without error. This was not a coincidence. It was a truth confirmed in real time, right here in this courtroom. The defense's desperation. The defense attorney rose again, his tone sharper than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is all emotional manipulation. A dog's bark doesn't prove guilt. A toddler's words, however tragic her circumstances, cannot serve as forensic evidence. You must rely on facts, not feelings." He gestured toward the evidence table. "Where's the DNA? Where's the fingerprint that puts my client in that basement? They don't have it. And if they don't have it, they haven't proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt." It was a logical argument, but it lacked the weight of what everyone had just seen. The jury had heard the lab reports, the testimony from experts. They'd seen the photographs of the basement, dim, concrete, with one small barred window. And now they had Lily's innocent statement, backed by the instinct of a dog who had no concept of court theatrics. Lily in the gallery, in the gallery. Lily sat quietly on her mother's lap, her stuffed bunny tucked under her chin. She didn't understand legal arguments or burden of proof. She only knew that Rex was a good dog, and that the bad man smelled like the place she never wanted to see again. At one point, Rex glanced back toward her, ears perked. She smiled faintly, a moment of pure innocence amid the tension. For several jurors, that smile did something the lawyer's words couldn't. It humanized the entire case. This wasn't about abstract law. It was about a child's life and safety. The judge's reminder, Judge Patterson, an older man with a voice that carried authority without shouting, addressed the jury directly. You will have to decide this case based on the evidence you've heard and seen. This includes witness testimony, expert analysis, and yes, the canine demonstration. It is up to you to determine how much weight to give each piece of evidence. He looked over his reading glasses. You may also consider the credibility of each witness, no matter their age, so long as you believe they are speaking truthfully. It was a subtle but important reminder. He was giving them permission to believe Lily. The energy in the room by now, the gallery had fallen into a tense quiet. Even the reporters, usually quick to scribble notes, were listening with still pens. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse lawn, but inside, time felt suspended. Rex remained seated at Officer Daniels' side, calm now, though his earlier bark still seemed to echo faintly in people's minds. The defendant's face was paler than before. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but whatever reassurance he offered didn't seem to land. Final rebuttal. Helen stood once more, delivering her final rebuttal before the jury was dismissed. For deliberation. Reasonable doubt is a cornerstone of justice. But there's nothing reasonable about ignoring the truth when it stands, sits, and barks right in front of you. There's nothing reasonable about dismissing a child's words when they match the trained detection of a K-9 officer and align with every other piece of circumstantial evidence we've shown you. Her gaze swept over the jurors. Justice is not only about science, it's also about human truth. And sometimes it takes a child and a dog to reveal it. The defendant's stare as the jury filed out. Hollis fixed his eyes on the table, jaw tight. He avoided looking toward Lily or Rex. He avoided looking at the jurors entirely. But his knuckles were white against the wood, and that, Helen thought, was as telling as anything else. The atmosphere in the courthouse had changed completely. By the time the jurors left the room, everyone from the reporters to the bailiffs knew the momentum had shifted in one clear direction. The decision now rested with 12 people, but in many hearts and minds, the verdict already felt inevitable. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling, fans, and the soft shuffle of the bailiff's shoes as he moved into position. The jury had been gone for just under 4 hours, a remarkably short time for a case of this magnitude. Everyone knew what that meant. Quick verdicts usually carried certainty, and in most cases, that certainty favored the prosecution. Lily sat in the front row beside her mother, swinging her small legs nervously, clutching the same stuffed bunny she had brought to the witness stand days earlier. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed faintly, casting pale light across the tense scene. Every set of eyes was trained on the double doors at the side of the courtroom, waiting for the jurors to file back in. The defendant sat rigid at the table, his suit jacket draped over the back of his chair, shirt collar slightly wilted from the weight of the day. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering something that earned only a faint nod in response. Across the aisle, the prosecutor stacked her files neatly, her hand resting calmly atop the folder marked People v. Carter. It was a calm that came only when you believed you had presented an airtight case. Officer Daniels stood at the back of the courtroom, Rex sitting obediently at his side. The German shepherd seemed unusually still, as though he too sensed that something important was about to be decided. His amber eyes scanned the room, occasionally glancing toward Lily. Each time their eyes met, she gave a tiny wave. The bailiff opened the door, and the 12 jurors entered, walking in a solemn line to their seats. They carried the weight of a decision that would alter lives forever. The foreman, a middle-aged man with deep lines etched into his forehead, held a folded piece of paper. He avoided eye contact with everyone except the judge. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and the judge entered, robes swaying as he took his seat. "You may be seated," he said. Turning to the jury, his voice remained steady. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied, handing the folded paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge unfolded it slowly, eyes scanning the words before returning it to the foreman. "Please read the verdict." The foreman stood, voice steady but low. "In the matter of the People versus Daniel Carter, on the charge of kidnapping, in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of unlawful confinement of a minor, guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, guilty." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Lily's mother pressed her hands to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Lily herself tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand the meaning of the words. The defendant slumped forward, the weight of the verdict pressing down on him like a physical force. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, but the man's eyes were fixed on the table. The judge turned to the jury. "Thank you for your service. You are excused." Then, shifting his gaze toward the gallery, he said something that would be repeated in news articles and television broadcasts for weeks to come. "This court has seen many forms of evidence over the years: documents, photographs, witness statements. But this case reminds us that sometimes the truth comes in the purest, most unexpected forms, from those too young to fabricate, and from those who cannot speak in our language, but speak nonetheless through action. Today, that truth was carried by a child, and by a dog." Officer Daniels felt a swell of pride at the judge's words. Rex, oblivious to the legal weight of the moment, gave a quiet huff of air and sat a little taller. Lily glanced toward him, a shy smile breaking across her face. As the courtroom began to empty, reporters surged toward the doors, eager to relay the verdict. Outside, news vans were already broadcasting live updates, headlines scrolling across the bottom of screens: "Guilty verdict in child kidnapping case," and "Police dog and child testimony lead to conviction." Inside, Officer Daniels made his way toward Lily and her mother. Kneeling beside the girl, he smiled. "You did really well, Lily," he said gently. She shrugged in that unconcerned way only a child can manage. "I just told Rex what I smelled." Daniels chuckled softly, and that made all the difference. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a single dog treat shaped like a bone. "Want to give him a thank you?" Lily's eyes lit up. She took the treat and held it out to Rex. The dog sniffed it, then took it gently from her hand, his tail wagging. The moment was small and quiet, but for those who had witnessed the trial, it carried enormous weight. A prosecutor approached, extending her hand to Daniels. "I've seen a lot of witnesses in my career," she said, "but I don't think I've ever seen a partnership like that between a child and a canine." Daniels accepted the handshake. "Rex doesn't care about the law. He just knows right from wrong." As they spoke, the defendant was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. His eyes swept the room briefly before the officers escorted him through the side door. There was no last word, no outburst, just the sound of chains lightly clinking as he walked. Lily's mother knelt to speak to her daughter. "It's over now, honey. You're safe. Is the bad man going to the basement?" Lily asked innocently. Her mother smiled faintly, brushing hair from her face. "No, sweetie. He's going somewhere far away where he can't hurt anyone." That night, the courthouse stood quiet, the day's energy dissipating into the warm summer air. But the story didn't fade so easily. Within 24 hours, major news outlets were running Features on the little girl who whispered to a police dog. Social media flooded with photos of Lily holding Rex's collar, her bunny tucked under her arm. Hashtags like hashtag Lily and Rex and hashtag basement smell trended for days. In interviews, legal analysts debated the admissibility of such testimony, but most agreed on one thing. Without Lily's remark and Rex's confirmation, the case might have ended very differently. The combination of her sensory memory and his scent detection had bridged the gap between suspicion and certainty. Officer Daniels found himself fielding calls from other departments, asking about his training methods. Honestly, he told one police chief, there's no manual for what happened. You can't train a bond like that. You just have to recognize it when it shows up. A week later, Daniels visited Lily's home. This time, there was no courtroom tension, no cameras, no stern judges. Just a backyard with a small swing set, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and a little girl in overalls running to greet a familiar. Gog, Rex bounded toward her, tail wagging, as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Hi, Rex," she said brightly, her earlier shyness gone. Daniels handed her mother an envelope. Inside was a photo taken the day after the trial. Lily, feeding Rex the treat in the courtroom, both of them framed by sunlight through the high windows. Beneath it was a short handwritten note, for bravery that spoke louder than words. Later, as Daniels and Rex drove back to the station, the officer glanced at his partner in the rearview mirror. "You did good, buddy," he said softly. Rex blinked slowly in the warm afternoon light, content and calm. The trial had ended, but its ripple effects were only beginning. Lily would grow up remembering a scary time that ended with a friend in fur and a room full of people who believed her. And for Rex, there would be other cases, other suspects, but perhaps none quite like the day a 3-year-old leaned in and whispered the truth only he could hear.